So guys, I'm back. So, I wanted to do a video about the most difficult thing about soundproofing a home studio. Or we could call this, what's that noise? Oddly enough, this starts on the roof of an apartment building. And that seems weird, but if you've listened to our Kokomo Hum video, you'll understand what I'm talking about. So the most challenging part with a home studio is low frequency control. So you can like get isolation for vocals and things like that pretty easily, but when you got like bass drum, bass guitar, or any low frequencies that you don't want to get into the rest of the house, or low frequency noises from upstairs that you don't want to have get down here, that kind of stuff, which you may not hear with this headset mic, but you get the point. So a couple of things. To start out, you'll notice I'm wearing headphones. And the reason I'm wearing headphones is some of the things we're going to talk about and going to hear, you can't hear on a phone, and you can't hear it on most computer speakers. So you got to put on a set of in-ears or a set of good headphones to hear low enough frequencies to actually hear what we're talking about. So the way this started is we got a phone call, and actually this is not the way the recording studio thing started, but the relationship between, forget it, listen to Kokomo Hum. So anyhow, we get called out to this apartment building because they're complaining about a humming noise that's coming into an apartment, and other apartments in this same place, that's a 3-story building with dozens and dozens and dozens of apartments, are not hearing this noise. So anyway, let's just say the noise is kind of like this, relative to someone talking in the room we were in. So this is what they're hearing. And we're trying to figure out, how is this getting into this apartment and yet it's not going anywhere else in the building? So to discuss that, we're going to have to go over and look at another thing over here on Mr. Computer Monitor, which we'll be doing momentarily as we set up another camera. And just so you know, we actually are going to get to why this has something to do with soundproofing a home studio and many other things. But anyway, so we get to this place and there's this going on in this apartment. This is the roof above the apartment. These are air conditioning units. And there's dozens and dozens and dozens of them, and they're all mounted the same way. So let's take a look at how these things were mounted. Well, maybe we can do that. Let's stop that for a minute because that's pretty annoying. So if I take this and we show you, basically these units are mounted to a rail, sitting on another rail, sitting on the roof on these I forget what they call these things. But anyway, these are just air conditioning units like outside your house. Now the ones outside of your house don't do this into your house, or you'd probably leave your home. So how is all this low frequency energy getting in here and what's causing it? And that's really the challenge that we had with this particular thing. So we get there, we hear this noise, we go up on the roof, and when you're walking around the roof, you don't really hear it, but you feel it in your feet. You get your ear up really close to one of these, really, really close, and you hear that noise. But as you get your head down lower towards the bottom, it goes away. Yet you can hear it and feel it in the floor up here. Now what we got into is we found that the units were mounted on these, which are rubber vibration isolators. And this is a product that has a high enough deflection that typically a 48 hertz wave, which is what we were hearing, would be damped by these. However, the problem, they had them sitting on these things. That seems pretty good, other than they could fall off the rail, but that's a whole nother issue. The problem turned out to be this simple. They attached them to the rail with an angle bracket that tied them to the rail. So this single screw here and here, 4 of them on each unit, is enough to put that into the apartment downstairs. Now what you're seeing right there is what we did. We disconnected, and we were running just a single unit at the time. We disconnected it from the rail, and the resultant downstairs was that. Now, if you're listening carefully on good headphones, you can hear that it's still there. But we had a 24 dB drop in level from just disconnecting 4 screws. So the challenge when you get into doing home studios is vibration. So when you try to do vibration isolation, no matter how you go about it, whether it's isolating this from a rail or isolating this from a roof, there's a lot of challenges. So the first one is physical contact. So if your walls are tied to your joists in your basement, you're going to have some issues. But beyond that, there's some other stuff that was going on here that was kind of unusual and not easily understood. This entire roof here has all kinds of units like this. You can see them off in the distance. They're all over the place. But there's only one apartment in the building that has this going on. So the question then is why? And it has to do with deflection and flexibility of the roof system. So it was just the magic of math that in a particular spot up there in the roof, you ended up with a situation where all the right things came together, that this frequency was showing up in that apartment. And it was a little bit in the hallway outside it, but the neighboring apartments weren't getting it. When we turned on all these other units, this was the unit that was for the apartment we were working on. When we turned on the other ones, it hardly changed at all. The other ones could activate it, however. It didn't matter which one on the rail did it. It was just this thing where this one place was a problem. So when people talk to us about designing a home studio with isolation or any kind of isolation, the challenge is always, how do you prevent that? So when you get into designing a home studio of any kind, whether it's this one, which is quite honestly not in a designed room, I wish it was, but when I moved in here, it was like, I can't spend that kind of money. So what I just do is when I need to record music down here, I make everybody leave. So if you want an isolated studio, you have to put in vibration isolation that separates the entire space from the building you're in. It's what's known as room within a room construction. And then the materials you use and the deflection capability. For example, that isolator that we were talking about here. Let me just go back to this picture. That there isolator has a 1/2-inch deflection, which is enough to get rid of the particular frequency we were after. But sometimes you need more deflection than that depending on what you're mounting to what. So it's a buyer beware situation. If you're going to get into any kind of home studio isolation, you really need a design. It has to have vibration isolation in it, which is a combination of floating the walls, floating the ceiling, a whole bunch of things that have to be looked at. And then all it takes to screw it up is one badly placed screw or two. And then all of a sudden, your bass drum, this is 48 hertz, bass drum is more like 63. But your bass drum, your bass guitar, other things are suddenly going through the house, and thumping noises from upstairs of people walking and other things that go on are coming down into your studio the same path. And the math of trying to figure out like where in your house the joists have enough deflection that it's going to be a huge problem here and not a problem over there is pretty hard to do. Just like with this thing, we couldn't figure out why this one spot in the roof had this issue. We just had it, and then we had to find a way to isolate it. So we found our solution, and now the structural engineer has to figure out a way to reattach these units without bypassing the vibration isolation. So that'll be his challenge. We could help him with it, but he kind of likes to do these things himself. So he's gonna have fun with that one. And if you do your home studio, look into some products. Kinetics Noise has a really good section of vibration isolation materials, and they have a lot of interesting information about room within a room design. So that's one good source, and there's lots of other ones out there. But these are the kinds of problems that occur if you don't get it right.